Good morning. My name is Michael Clanahan. I'm a biology and music major here at Emory. I'm a senior, and welcome. My plant this morning is Artemisia absinthium. It's in the Asteraceae family, commonly known as wormwood, but also known as green ginger, and there's a German variety called vermouth. Okay. Wormwood. Is it actually a big deal? Well, as you'll find out, yes it is, and it's becoming even more of a big deal now that we see that there are some medicinal purposes to it that are being pursued. So we'll look at that. Botanical description. Like most Asteraceae, it has a firm, woody stem, lots of them, and this is because it grows mostly in an arid climate. This could be anywhere from mainly Northern Europe to Siberia, but also across the northern United States into Canada. As you can see on the right, there are many silvery leaves. Some look a little bit more white than others, but mostly it's silver because of small hairs. And then, like many Asteraceae, there are globular flower bundles. As you can see those on the bottom right. And they're small yellow flowers. The fruits are very small as well. So, characteristic of Asteraceae is the bitterness of the plant. Most have a pretty strong bitterness, but it ranges from mild to severe. And the smell as well, which I will get into in a second. All right, so here's some related plants that are in the family. We have Roman wormwood, we have sea wormwood, southern wood, and tarragon. Tarragon you probably heard of as a spice in your spice cabinet. We also know this as dragon's wort from the class. Southernwood is an interesting plant because it grows along the borders of fields in a lot of arid places in middle to northern Europe. And of course, it's similar in physical likeness, but again, the bitterness is key here. So. Traditional uses, as we've discussed in class, it's mentioned in Ebers Papyrus a long time ago. Dioscorides also mentions it in his De Materia Medica as an insect repellent and an antidote to hemlock poisoning. Another thing it guards against is the death cap poisoning. In the Historia Naturalis, Pliny in the 1st century, he starts talking about the powerful effect on gastrointestinal worms. And this is where the name actually comes from, they think, because of its powerful effect on these worms and to clean it out. Modern day, we have TCM, which is used as a bacillary dysentery. And this is kind of going along the lines of it being used for intestinal worms and things like that as well. In the Kirklareli province of Turkey, it's known as Pelin-2 or Pelin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But some specific uses for this use the aerial parts of the plant as abortifacient, appetizer, and a blood depurative. As an infusion. Now, if you use this as a decoction, or how they use it, it is used to treat diabetes, uterine cysts, and tuberculosis. An interesting use for this is in the shoots, and they use that, you just eat it, little pieces, I think 7 or 8 times a day, and it's used to treat malaria. We'll look at the uses of these. Also, traditionally, in common day, I guess, you've heard of absinthe, and this is the main historical thing about wormwood. It's usually, or it's originally used as an extract for stomach tonic, but then was used as a drink, a popular drink. And I don't speak French, but La Fée Verte is the green fairy, and that's what it got because of the characteristic green color of the drink, which I have a picture of, and also because of these hallucinations, which we'll get into why that happened. Originally, it was available to only upper-class circles, and you can see this a lot in artwork and things like that, because Picasso, Rembrandt, and Vincent van Gogh are 3 very important people in terms of absinthe's popularity and potentially even downfall. For Vincent van Gogh, they think that this actually aggravated his psychosis and caused him to have even more hallucinations, which may have ultimately led to his suicide. And then it actually it began to be more of an available drink. And in 1847, 700,000 liters were consumed in France alone. And as this production exploded, in the turn of the century in 1900, more than 36 million liters were consumed as a casual drink, more than anything. The side effects, of course, are the hallucinations, which I'll get into why that is. And you can see this Oscar Wilde quote here. What is the difference between what difference is there between a glass of absinthe and sunset? He actually really enjoyed it. So, chemistry. Thujone is our main chemical in here. It's a terpene. It's what gives its characteristic smell. And it's more of it's almost like a menthol smell. So it's also toxic in sufficient quantities, which we'll get into why that is. Absinthin is a sesquiterpene lactone, and that's what causes the extreme bitterness. It has a bitterness scale of 1 in 70,000 parts, which is quite high. Phenols, of course, we've talked about. And the 5 caffeoylquinic acids, I'll just say 5-CA, just because it's easier, and we'll get into the reasons for that. Biologically, we have thujone. It's thought to be reduced GABA-A activity, which causes more neuron firing, and this is where potentially the anecdotal convulsions may come in. Also, interestingly enough, ethanol seems to protect from this toxicity, which has some interesting repercussions in terms of its use in alcoholic drink. Quercetin is a phenolic. We talked about these in classes, having high antioxidant activity. It's known for its hydrogen peroxide scavenging. It has analgesic properties, which we've talked about as well. And the 5-CA is known as an efflux pump inhibitor, which could potentially cause bacteria to keep the antibiotics inside their cells instead of using these pumps to kind of push it out, and they would survive. So what happens is this docks with the pumps and then changes their conformation, so everything has to stay inside. This is one of my most interesting things, I think. So this is a picture of a colon, an affected Crohn's disease colon, and you can see there's a lot of disease in there. I don't know if you know what to look for, but you can see that there's some scarring. It is highly inflamed. And something that's very common of Crohn's disease is these things called fistulas. You can see in the bottom right-hand part of the screen, where the colon will actually dock with other parts of the body and cause it to open up. So it could open up to the outside. It could open up to other parts of your body, which is highly characteristic. So these caffeoyl and dicaffeoylquinic acids show in vitro to inhibit HIV integrase, which causes the virus to put its DNA inside the host DNA. So it inhibits that, which is really interesting. Also in vitro, protects against herpes virus. The Crohn's disease is thought to be an autoimmune disease, but there is some evidence showing that it may actually be a viral disease, which would be interesting in this because they used it for 10 weeks as a wormwood powder capsule, along with the normal steroid treatment and a control group on the outside. And they showed that the results were, after 10 weeks, 65% of the patients exhibited little to no symptoms, which is actually really interesting because the other ones all did. So also in these, there's no remission of the disease, and there was no further need for treatment. And there was a higher quality of life based on the Hamilton's Depression Scale. Contraindications. Thujone's really interesting because, wormwood is really interesting, I should say, because it's a very highly contested plant because of its past in absinthe. So in thujone, we see that it's a GABA-A receptor activity reducer, which is these convulsions. Also, there's a link potentially to kidney failure, but it's also hepatotoxic. Anxiety and sleeplessness are also being contributed to this. And as I said, through Jones' interactions with other drugs has not been well documented because of this. Allopathically, it's not currently used just because of this, and starting to get into the mainstream for this Crohn's disease potentially. CAM, as you can see, it's used as a tea, a tincture, and all these things here. And here's a product you can buy. So here's the moving forward. There's important plant. It's an important plant in traditional medicines, as you've seen. We've found some antioxidant properties that belong to this. And as we've also seen with Crohn's disease, there's potentially a viral connection to that. We'll see what happens with that. And in the past 10 years, there seems to be a positive public view. And so this is resulting in some interesting medical finds.